So Kate Wood is the chef's kiss. We just love working with Kate and we want to share her story. She invests so much into not only the team and the people around her, but her community.
I love nurturing people and bringing them on and bringing out the potential and the best of themselves. The Work Health Hub is an online platform. It's a membership platform dedicated to the mental health and wellbeing of the workforce.
This episode's all about finding out what really makes Kate tick. So we want to know what inspires Kate, what motivates her to give so much back, because the work that she does is amazing and we want to share that with the world.
The main aim of the hub is to empower every single person within an organisation to prioritise mental health and wellbeing.
How big is this community going to grow to?
It's nationwide. Let's hope we go international. That would be lovely. But even if for a holiday, that would be nice.
So, Kate,
Yeah.
why do you do what you do?
I would say lots of reasons. Firstly and mainly because I love nurturing people and bringing them on and bringing out the potential and the best of themselves. Why I do particularly what I do now in terms of mental health and wellbeing is because I think we've all got mental health, just like we've all got physical health. And mine has taken a few knocks over the years with one thing and another. And I think we need that understanding, and employers in particular need that understanding so that they can get the best out of their workforce. And having worked in a really, really, really toxic workplace, I found out, unfortunately, that the negative impact that an unsupportive workplace can have on your mental health. So that's why I'm leading on this project now.
So you mentioned your nurturing nature. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's kind of a big part of your, I suppose, your drive to kind of help so many people?
I think because I love nurturing people, I like to see opportunities in everything with everybody. So if you've got somebody that really wants to make something work, I will always support them and try and get the best out of them. With the hub, I think it's the main aim of the hub is to empower every single person within an organisation to prioritise mental health and wellbeing, because it is so, so important. It was important before the pandemic, but it took something like the pandemic to actually get it up that priority list and for employers to start noticing and thinking, actually, yeah, we do need to do something about it. Unfortunately, it's taken a little bit of a dip again. So a lot of employers are perhaps not concentrating on it, or there's not as many as we want it to. With my nurturing style, we try to get as many employers on board to sign up to the project, and then we guide them through the whole process. And I think it's that works. People do business with people, not with processes, not with systems. We've got to try and evoke those softer skills and get people to turn to those rather than just turn to a process and think that'll solve everything.
So with this dip that you've identified, how does that kind of make you feel personally? Personally,
it makes me more determined, because with the pandemic, we noticed absence levels, presenteeism levels go down. And then as we were sort of coming out of the pandemic, we noticed that more employers wanted to do more around mental health and wellbeing. Now, with the last wave of the longitudinal study that the Enterprise Research Centre were involved with, who were one of our partners, we're noticing now that employers, it's sort of going off the radar a little bit. That makes me more and more determined to get more employers on board and to show the impact that the work's having in different workforces.
So what's influenced you to get to where you are now?
Gosh, lots and lots of things. I think my dad is probably my biggest cheerleader. So my dad was a police officer for 30 odd years in the CID, and I always had my drive and my passion for things exactly from my dad. So in terms of personality and characteristic traits, I am absolutely a duplicate of my dad. He always instilled in me, treat people with respect and how you'd like to be treated yourself. And if you say you're going to get back to somebody, always make sure that you do. So I always like to treat people how I'd like to be treated. I don't care what role you are, what rank you are in an organisation, I'm always going to treat you exactly the same with exactly the same respect. So my dad's been a massive, massive influence. And I'd say probably the team I'm in now is probably the best team I've ever worked in. We're so supportive, we're so nurturing of each other, and we've always got each other's back. And that's so, so important. You know, with launching the new project, you do get that imposter syndrome, you do doubt yourself, and having those sort of cheerleaders around you is really, really important.
So that nurturing and integrity that you kind of talk about, getting back to people, are those some of your personal core values?
Yeah, definitely.
What other values do you have?
So I've got really, really strong values around trust, honesty, patience, sort of competence as well. If you don't know something, say you don't know it, and get back to the person if you can try and find out. So I've got really, really strong values, and I think in other positions, particularly in that toxic workplace that I mentioned, those values were challenged quite a bit for me, and things just did not sit right at all. It went against my morals, my values, absolutely everything. So I knew I had to leave that company. Whereas at the university, my values are pretty much match the university's values as well around that. Be bold, be future focused. It's a lot of it is about the students, but it's also about that research value and the impact and that civic agenda. So I like to make an impact locally and nationally, and those match all of my values.
What impact did it have on you then when they weren't aligned with that previous company?
Massive, horrible negative impact. I was employed as the operations manager in a charity as well, which is what always surprises people. And I wasn't even allowed to send an email without the CEO checking it first. So if I had a member of staff as well feeling really unwell, I would have to make them sit and wait in the office for the CEO to come back. I wasn't allowed to send them home. And that just did not sit right with me. Everything was time in motion. There was the expectation that we saw 5 families a day. And if we didn't see those 5 families, why not? Every minute was accounted for, and it was just too constrained. I now know it said more about that person, that CEO, than it did about myself, but I just knew that wasn't the right place for me. And it wasn't until I think my partner said, Kate, I need to take you to the doctors. I really do need to take you to go and get this sorted, because I'd just lost all my confidence. It absolutely stripped me of any sort of self-esteem, anything. So it was then that I knew I'd got to get out. And it took a good 12 months in the current job for me to get back to my usual chirpy self.
What lessons did you learn?
I think it's actually made me a lot stronger. So in that respect, I think it probably did do me a favour. I'm a proper softie at heart. It also made me more determined to stick with my values as well. And if something doesn't feel right or sound right, to stand my ground. And I've done that a couple of times in this job as well. And it's been fantastic, and I've got where I wanted to get to. So it did teach me a lot. It also taught me to believe in myself a lot more and to go with my gut.
What advice would you say to somebody who's feeling maybe in that kind of uncomfortable, toxic environment and unheard?
To go and speak to somebody outside of the organisation. It depends where you work. Some organisations have fantastic HR departments. So if you're in a big organisation, big corporate, you've got those relevant places you can go to. For me, working in the charity, there wasn't anywhere, because the HR person was the CEO's partner. So there was literally nowhere for me to go. And then when I did speak to the board of trustees, they all sided with the CEO. So I felt really, really trapped. So I would say get independent advice. Absolutely always try mediation and things like that, which is what I tried. But, don't be frightened to say enough's enough.
So what impacts it having now that you're in a place that you are aligned with your values?
Really, really positive now. And that's, I think when we did the launch for the Work Health Hub, that's why we had so many people to thank at the end, because people genuinely believed in what I was doing. They wanted it to succeed. We wanted it to do well. They could see the impact we'd already had on organisations and the mental health and wellbeing of the workforce. So it's having a massive positive impact, because it feels like people have got your back. I've stood my ground, and I've pushed and pushed and pushed to get it to where it is today, even with challenges and senior leadership chucking challenges in as well. I've trusted my instincts and gone with that. So positive.
So you mentioned earlier about how then your personal values are aligned within the university. Yeah. How are the values of the hub aligned with your personal values?
They are really aligned, and that was super important for us, for both myself and my colleague Nadia, that we wanted some real core values that everybody could buy into, and it had to sit right with us as well. Otherwise, you can't drive something forward if you're not passionate about what it stands for. So we went out to members that had already expressed an interest in the hub, and also to teams we'd worked with over the last 4 years, asked them to do a bit of a poll as to what values would they look for in an online platform, in an online community. And that's how we came up with the 7 core values. So things like collaboration, supportive, advice, listening, feeding back, always sort of developing stuff. Those are all really core and key to us.
How did you get people to fill in the poll and to engage with that?
We basically narrowed it down to a list of values, and we asked them to choose their top 3 and add any additional ones if they felt something wasn't captured. So that went around to about 90 different organisations that we'd worked with already. They sent those in, and then we captured it. That's how the values were born.
How have you seen the kind of communities, I suppose, their value? Have you seen them change? Have you seen people change? What impact have you had on the community?
Yeah, it's really nice when you see that culture shift, and we've seen that in some really different industries. So NHS Trust, for example, that was one of the first organisations we worked with, Wye Valley NHS Trust, and they have asked us to work with them to underpin their 5-year mental health and wellbeing strategy for staff. And they had a new HR director. They've recruited and trained 150 mental health first aiders and wellbeing champions. There's much more of a positive environment, much more of a family feel to the NHS Trust. But then you've got places like construction companies. It's traditionally male orientated. They didn't really talk about mental health and wellbeing. We went in and we started looking at the culture. We engaged staff. We did focus groups, trained all the site managers and contracts managers. And the shift now, you've got more people coming forward to talk about their mental health and wellbeing than you did have before we started this work.
So with that kind of healthy culture that they've got, do you think, what impacts that have on like productivity and the way that they're working?
The bottom line for organisations is they need to look after their people, because that's the biggest asset. And if you've got a happy, healthy team, your productivity, your business growth, your sustainability will take care of itself. You've just got to have a happy workforce who feel valued, who feel listened to. And now when you ask any employee what's most important to them, yes, with cost of living, money is important, but it's not the most important thing. It's actually feeling as though they've got a part to play in the organisation. They share the values, they share the mission statement, they feel heard, they feel like they're going along the journey with them rather than being dictated to. And you get much more, much happier teams, and then the productivity just takes care of itself.
So tell us about Kate Wood and what inspires you.
What inspires me? I think people's ideas inspire me, people that want to make the world a better place. Whenever I visit anywhere, I always like to leave it a little bit happier and chirpier than when I found it. And that's what I've always done throughout like the whole of my life. And again, that comes from my dad. It inspires me to work with like young people as well, when you get those really rich new ideas, and like we've had students on work experience and placements. I absolutely adore that, because they always think outside the box. And when you're managing a project and developing something new, you can sometimes get quite stuck in your own viewpoint. So I love that. But what inspires me are those leaders that, like, some inspirational ones. So it's like Stephen Bartlett, Karen Brady is another one. I can remember reading her book from cover to cover 3-4 times, because I thought, my gosh, that's a really strong woman, and that's exactly how I want to be. I'm probably a lot softer because I'm more green and yellow, as we've already discussed in terms of personality traits. Those are the sorts of people who have gone through adversity and just basically got to where they want to get to. So that absolutely inspires me.
So you just touched upon the personality traits we were talking before we started filming. What's green and yellow? But tell me about what your personality is and what relates to green and yellow.
We always like to see the positive in things. We always like to take people along the journey with us rather than dictating. We take into consideration everybody's different sort of personality styles, learning styles, emotions, feelings. And actually, women on the whole are probably a lot more nurturing, a lot more collaborative, which actually makes them better leaders, but it also means they burn out quicker, because we are so collaborative and we want to give so much that's how we have to be careful we don't burn ourselves out. But yeah, so that's green and yellow.
How important is it for you to work with different personality types and to then kind of sort of see those strengths?
It's really important, because I think if we didn't have different personalities in our teams, it would just be a replica. You wouldn't want like 50 of me, because we'd all be thinking the same thing and we wouldn't think objectively. You do need people that are perhaps a little bit more pragmatic. You do need people that are perhaps a little bit more challenging, just to sort of test ideas out and to get the best out of a project. So you don't, when you're recruiting staff, you don't want to go and recruit the same person as you. You want to go and recruit somebody who's slightly different, that can bring different traits, attributes, strengths, etc. to your project. And that's why it's so important for managers, so line managers, leaders, supervisors, to get to know their team really, really well, to do something like discovery insights, to get to understand what makes each person in that team tick. And in terms of mental health and wellbeing, that is an absolute lifeline, because you get to understand how people will respond to different situations, how communications will land, and it will help you as a manager deliver what you need to deliver.
How would you then kind of sort of like lead somebody who's maybe kind of sort of more on the fiery red to then be more earth green?
I think it's good when you can delegate, and you can delegate different tasks to people, because that can really play on their strengths. But if somebody was being quite challenging, so quite fiery red, for example, like you said, I'd probably just ask them to take a step back and think, how would that impact, or how would they feel if that happened to their son, their daughter, their family member? So to try and think of things from a different perspective. We've got different personalities like that in the team, actually. And I think we feel so comfortable with each other that we can sort of not call that out, but at least say, oh, but have you thought about this? To offer some different suggestions.
And when you're working with people that are that kind of sort of, well, you stick with that language, a fiery red, what value do they bring to collaborating with you?
I think they bring a different energy, and I can absolutely see the benefits of having fiery red, the cool blue, all of that. I think sometimes, especially if you're yellow or green, you have to stop yourself and not take it as a personal insult. With those sort of characteristics, I think it's just about being self-aware. Self-awareness is really, really important, and recognising how that person impacts on you, what it triggers in you, and then do that work about yourself in a little bit more detail. Because it's not saying that one's right, one's wrong. It's just they're very different. And sometimes when you can clash. Especially, the softer skills against the more realistic and ambitious and perhaps democratic styles, they can often clash. But it's about recognising each of your strengths and areas and vulnerabilities as well.
So it's interesting because a common trait for small business owners, leaders, do demonstrate that kind of sort of assertive, fiery red, and that's sometimes where people can progress up, the ladder in a career as well.
Yeah.
For then, kind of sort of people like that, how would you advise them to kind of really get the most out of their team so they can inspire people, they can inspire to thrive?
That's fantastic, but I think it's about having that self-awareness that not everybody is like you, and that you might not necessarily agree with the yellow person or the green person, but actually they've got something just as valuable to bring to the table as you have. Yes, leaders are naturally sort of assertive, and we've got all that drive and that passion, and you need that to lead. And I would say I've got a lot of passion and drive. I just perhaps tend to fluctuate more or at least drop back to the caring about others and making sure everybody's okay, like a proper mother hen, before I then go and drive that initiative forward. So I just like to check everyone's all right, and then I'll do it. So for those fiery red, I'd just say, don't take your eye off the ball. Don't just tell people stuff. Don't just dictate. Have a think, stop and think. Don't do things in haste. If you're going to send that email, put it in your drafts, go back to it, because it's always about looking at it and how is that going to land. And if you know the personalities in your team, you've got a better idea of how to structure that email.
It's interesting because I think it's exciting seeing the rise of more of an introverted leader. And actually some of the traits which I see, kind of like now understanding around discovery insights is exciting. Do you see there's a bit more of a shift around this kind of sort of, you mentioned earlier how females naturally are better leaders. Is there more of a trait, and how is that being supported? You know, how's that movement kind of sort of like being supported?
I think because there's more of a focus now on health and well-being, and particularly mental health, and because I guess employees are in the driving seat a little bit more than employers, because staff looking for jobs now want somewhere where they feel valued, they want to share the vision, they want to know that they're going to be looked after. And health and well-being, the pandemic, if nothing else, made us reprioritise, reevaluate our life. We want better work-life balance. Family is much more important. So for any organisation or any senior leader that doesn't think that they've got to consider that and consider the health and well-being of their team, they're going to have the retention problems, they're going to have the recruitment problems, the conflict within the team, the low morale, because how we feel has an impact on how we behave. And there was an article recently that said line managers have much more of an impact on staff than their partners do. And we're 2/3 of the time at work. So if you can't show up as your true authentic self at work, then there's something very wrong. So managers have also got to be self-aware and think about how they behave and what impact that has on staff as well. It's not just about technical skills. It's not just about doing a job and managing a project. We're managing a team, we're managing people, and people have emotions. They're not robots, and we never know what people are going to come into the workplace with, because there's always stuff going on at home and outside our working lives, as well as stuff going on inside work. And so I think leaders need to be a lot more compassionate about that and take into consideration as well that they might have stuff going on, and it's okay to show that vulnerability as well.
What advice would you have for a company that maybe is a bit more closed? Because that openness is so important for growth. What advice would you have for a company that is closed off and wants to open up, but they're not quite sure on where to start?
I think it's get to know each other as a team. Don't think you've got to be in work 9 till 5 and you've got to be sat at your laptops, or you've got to be on the production line and not have that social time. The social time was lost during the pandemic, and we all know that we are social creatures. We like that human connection. And you've got to take into consideration as well that we don't all go home to a family. You know, some of us go home and we live on our own. So the workplace is a real social, it's a community, it's like a family. So I would say get to know your team members outside of work. You know, just take your eye off the ball a little bit, because actually you'll have such a positive impact on productivity by doing that, that taking a couple of hours out of your working day it's not going to have an impact on the amount of business you churn out, the sustainability of your business. It's actually going to be investing in it.
So with the diverse community that you work with, what really exciting ways have you heard for people to get to know their team?
One company that I worked with had the idea of creating a Spotify playlist, and they asked each member of the team to send in a song that made them happy, one that motivated them, one that got them moving, all those sorts. And they created playlists, and just by sharing those amongst the team, people started to get to know music tastes, but also the stories behind the songs as well. So I thought that was really innovative, and it was just a nice quirky idea. I think we poached it actually at the university, so that was good. But I think there's tons and tons of ideas to get to know your team. As I say, get out of the office, go for a walk, like you walk and talk. It's the best way to get to know your team members. You can do personality tests and things like that, but if you're going to do those, do something with them after. Don't just stick it in the HR file and that's it. So just think outside the box.
I'm going to take that Spotify idea, because I want to see Eleanor's Spotify. That'd be really nice, because I love listening to Eleanor's music.
It's really good. It's really enlightening, actually.
So you touched upon a couple of examples there, but can you give us some other examples about great organisations that you've worked with that have really adopted their kind of culture around mental health?
Yeah, and there's probably tons and tons of examples, and I always give shout outs to the organisations because they've done amazing. Two that spring to mind, one an engineering company in Telford, and they were very much male orientated, factory floor, productivity. And we went in, and it was actually the health, safety and quality manager, that got in touch and wanted to do something around health and well-being. Because of it being male orientated, they'd had a few issues with regards to men struggling quite a bit. So we went in, presented to the directors, needed a bit of persuasion, around return on investment, because we were offering to deliver workshops, and that means taking guys off the factory floor. So they wanted to know what they were getting for sort of the investment. And even though it was fully funded, their priority, especially straight after the pandemic, was productivity and business growth. But they allowed us to do it with a bit of careful persuasion. They've now got mental health first aiders. They've got all of their faces up on the factory floor. Staff can go and speak to them if they are struggling. We've given all managers sort of mental health awareness training and how to have conversations around mental health. The wellbeing champions meet on a regular basis, and a couple of months ago they were shortlisted in the Shropshire Chamber of Commerce Awards for good wellbeing in the workplace. So I'm keeping everything crossed for them that they win it, because they have absolutely turned it around, and the staff are feeling so much more valued and listened to. And then there's another company in Lichfield with my fabulous lady, Ria Oliver from Access Bookings. Again, during the pandemic, we worked with them. They'd been through a massive period of change. They are in the sort of entertainment business, so they arrange hospitality, sort of hotels, etc., for celebrities, people that are filming. And so during the pandemic, that was completely non-existent because nobody was going anywhere. They had to make quite a few people redundant after they'd been furloughed. But then when they returned to the office, business just picked up massively, and they had to then go back out to recruit. And if you think about those mixed messages that would be sending, there was some obviously old long-term staff there that were thinking, well, hang on a minute, you've just made people redundant, some of our friends, and now you're recruiting, so why couldn't we have kept those? But they communicated it so well. They managed that change really well. We went in and delivered some workshops which really helped to just draw the line and say, okay, they did what they had to do at the time. We've now got to move forward. Again, managers had mental health awareness training. We went in, we looked at a health and wellbeing strategy for them, effective recruitment, retention, and they've really turned it round. And you've got staff now far happier, flexible working. And Ria, I'm really pleased to see, she always supports all of our other initiatives as well and really flies the flag for positive mental health and wellbeing. So there's tons of examples I could give you, but it's amazing to see.
So what are some of the key factors that kind of happened within their kind of culture shift?
I think it was the communication. And when we go in and do staff surveys, when we first start working with organisations, there are always some really consistent themes. Communication, or lack of, line management, and a lot of that boils down to trust and whether line managers feel confident enough to have those conversations. And a lot of the feedback you get is, oh, it's luck of the draw what manager you have, whether you are supported or not. So communication, line managers, and raising awareness and having that empathy, showing compassion to other people that might be going through really difficult, challenging times, and just bearing with them, because we all have stuff like that going on. So, but communication is a biggie, and listening to staff as well. And then when they tell you something, do something with it. Don't just get the feedback and then that's it. Always do something with it.
How are you responding to that lack of consistency then with line managers? What tools for a business that maybe has then a large workforce?
We go in and we deliver some real bespoke workshops for managers. So we look at different tools that they can use to help facilitate conversations. So quite often managers, they've been promoted or they've got the job based on their technical skills, on their ability to manage a project and to drive productivity. They've perhaps not had or not got those skills or had the chance to develop those skills around people management, those softer skills around communication, listening, taking your team along the journey with you. So what we're trying to do is get those sorts of questions factored into the interview process. When you're recruiting a manager, ask them, how would you deal with a scenario such as a member of staff coming and saying to you that they're having a really bad time, that they're struggling? How would you deal with that? Because that will sift out your good managers to your amazing managers. Anybody can come in and develop a project and drive that forward. That's all technical stuff. There are very, very few people who will come in and show compassion, patience, trust, who will listen to their team and do it well. We deliver bespoke workshops for managers to explore those skills and to see, to basically demonstrate to them the impact that has and the positive impact. We spend quite a bit of time with them resourcing them up, if you like. So they've got signposting tools, resources, or all the information that they need to be able to support staff. And then we look at culture and we get the feedback from the staff. And one of the questions on the survey is, how confident would you feel having a conversation with your line manager? And that can be really telling. And it's quite a vulnerable position to be in. And when we feed that back to managers, often they're quite shocked. There's others that perhaps are like, well, I'm not here for that. And it's trying to change their perspective and make sure that they're receiving the training as well. If you make training voluntary around mental health, you will get the same managers come on that training all the time. And then you're talking to the converted. We really need to be making this a mandatory part of a management role. It's mental health and wellbeing.
How do you kind of train those soft skills then around kind of compassion and empathy, and they're really vital, and vulnerability? How do you train those in someone who might have never experienced them themselves?
It's difficult, a real challenge. I've seen some real hard-nosed directors thinking, I don't need to be talking about that, and I've got HR that can deal with that. Well, it's about just demonstrating the impact. So we use case studies, we use sort of real life examples, video footage, etc., to demonstrate the impact that's had. And if there's somebody willing to stand up in an organisation and talk about their own experience, that really does have an impact. And it only takes that one person to change the culture. So it is a challenge. You're not going to convert everybody, absolutely not. But I think to be a good manager, you need to have those, or at least want to try and develop those softer skills and be prepared to listen to people and take that on board. If you're not so self-aware and you're very tunnel visioned, you'll manage the project, but surely you would want to be known as a good manager for more than just delivering on a project.
So for that company that was, I suppose, main drivers were about productivity, their return on investment, how have you proved that to them?
So there's loads of research out there now that says for every £1 that you invest in mental health awareness, that early intervention, you get a £5.30 return. So we present that evidence because director level, they like to see the hard facts and they like research to back what you're saying. So we've demonstrated that. We've used case studies from perhaps similar organisations as well. So it's like perhaps in the construction industry or the engineering industry, we use different case studies. When you show a case study video and it's somebody actually talking about their mental health, their wellbeing, and how the workplace has had an impact, whether that's supportive or a negative impact, that seems to really hit home. So we absolutely want to develop more of those. But it is just about chipping away. It really is. Sometimes we're really up against it and you can't change people's minds and they're just, no, we don't want to know. And I think there's around 29% of employers that have got no intention whatsoever of doing anything around mental health and wellbeing, which is quite sad. But actually what will happen to them is that they will have poor retention, poor recruitment, really low staff morale, low productivity, and they won't have a business to run because the people will leave and go elsewhere because they're worth a lot more.
So you mentioned earlier, like a couple of advocates can change that culture.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work, and tell me more about that?
When we do the focus groups off the back of the surveys, we always choose some of the themes that came out and we unpick those a little bit more. And it only takes one bloke to say, yeah, I've been impacted by that, or I've had this issue. And then it's like the domino effect, they all start talking. We've had CEOs tell their story when they've launched a new mental health and wellbeing strategy. And that is so powerful that they've said, well, actually, I've had issues with mental health and wellbeing. And you get staff then saying, well, that's the last person we would have thought would have had a mental health issue. Those are the sorts of things that are powerful. So if you get a few brave people, and it is brave, it's a brave thing to do, to stand up and talk about their mental health and wellbeing, it just makes it normal, breaks that taboo.
What does that mean then when it's normalised, when that conversation is normalised? What does that mean to you?
That's like literally priceless, isn't it? It's like, oh, my job here is done when it's normal, because we've all got mental health, just as we've all got physical health. And we don't think twice, do we, about ringing up saying I've got a stomach bug, or I've got COVID, or I've broke my leg. That's talked about, but we don't ring up, or we don't have those conversations as much around, do you know what, I'm really struggling today. And I try to lead by example. If I'm having a terrible day, I'll say I'm having a terrible day, because that vulnerability makes us human. And Gone are the days where we need to keep that mentality of I'm a manager, I'm a leader, I'm a director, so I cannot show any vulnerability whatsoever. I need to be this, this, and this. Actually, that's just robotic. How are you meant to get your team to invest in you and trust you and open up to you if you're just like a robot? It's about leading by example.
But when you see then somebody who is, I suppose, tough skins, you know, kind of how does it make you feel personally when you see them kind of like understand what benefits this is, and but more importantly, want to change?
I think I take a massive sigh of relief and think, oh, thank God, it's human. They're human after all. And as soon as you see that, you think, we've got tons of stuff we can do here. We can absolutely help this person drive the team to where they want it to be. The minute you show that bit of vulnerability, that's it. You're on a winning streak. Whereas we've always been brought up, and we've been of a generation, and generations before us of hard-nosed, keep your personal life out of it. Life isn't like that anymore. You know, we just need to go back to simplicity and stop thinking about the what ifs and, oh, if I show this vulnerability, people are going to think this of me. We need to sort of change the narrative around that. And actually, we're all human, and it makes us much easier to work with. And as a manager, your team are going to feel far closer to you and have much more respect than if you're like that robotic manager, which doesn't wash anymore.
So if I had a magic lamp, what 3 wishes would you wish for to make all of this happen, this normalising, this simplicity?
Oh gosh, just 3. Probably got a list really long. I would probably get people, or I'd want more people to listen to each other. I'd want a lot more compassion as well in the world. I mean, gosh, with everything that's going on at the moment, I think we need to strip away. It's back to the simplicity again. What I'd love is for people to go back to basics, go back to those basic human connections, interactions, and stop thinking that the external world has got all the answers. You know, just look inwards, be a bit more self-aware. So I'd absolutely give everybody the skill to be able to listen. Another wish that's completely unwork related, animal cruelty. That's probably the only time I'd ever be done for murder, is if I witnessed that, because I can't stand it, and child cruelty as well. So if I can sandwich those into a...
You can have that as one.
As
just
a wish.
Cruelty, we'll get rid of cruelty.
Cruelty in general, people to be more compassionate and go back to simplicity.
You sound like a cheap date then. Which is good, I like simplicity, this is good. Back to basics.
Honestly, we always joked in my family that if ever I was a doll with instructions on the back, my instructions would just be really easy: cuddles and keep her fed. That would be it, because it's just, I don't need anything else in life. Why do we need anything else? I think we've just become attuned to, we've got to find happiness outside of everything. We've got to have that material possession. We've got to achieve this. We should be doing this. And that's just too much. Why can we not just be who we want to be?
So, beyond cuddles and food, what does Kate need to thrive?
I need my garden. I do. I need my garden. I am at nature, and take my shoes off, standing barefoot on the grass. That's the perfect grounding for me. We all need a little bit of love as well, don't we? Bit of love, bit of nature, family around me, friends. Yeah. That's about it for me. I'm really easy to look after.
I like your doll. It sounds good. I want the Kate doll. And I hope my kids have the Kate doll.
Yeah, exactly.
So how can we inspire that next generation? Because you talked about earlier, like, you know, kind of you get a lot from seeing them, that fresh ideas, all of that kind of sort of creativity come. How can we inspire the next generation to thrive?
I've already started, in a way, at the university. So I go in, I get asked back each year to deliver a tutorial session to HR students. And I think that's really, really important, because HR, they're often seen to hide behind processes. And I want to bring the human back into human resources. So forget your processes and your policies and all the rest of it. Have a human conversation first with a person. So We take student placements as well. So it's about just trying to inject a little bit of that compassion, that not everything is as it seems all the time. Don't judge a book by its cover. Be flexible. Don't hide behind processes and policies, all those sorts of things. So we're also in the process of working with mental health student ambassadors as well at the university. And we are going to be doing a specific project around that transition from education to employment, because that's huge culture shock. And I think there's a lot to be done there around mental health and wellbeing, and arming our young people with the skills to enter the workplace. And if they've got that sound knowledge and understanding, then by the time they get to be managers, they're going to have that ingrained in them.
It's exciting. So how can we widen that then from then the younger generation to then a more society shift?
Oh gosh, I know, I'm on a mission really. I don't think that generation are a lost cause, because I have seen changes there in some of the companies that I've already mentioned, and that's brilliant when you see that. So I think just keep chipping away and just get the message across that everybody's got mental health.
So tell me about the hub. What's
Okay.
the vision for the hub? Where are you wanting to take this?
The idea for that came off the back of the last 4 years working with organisations as part of a pilot project, basically wanting to reduce absence, presenteeism and stigma associated to mental health. And the hub idea came from us identifying some gaps in wellbeing provision. So there's no ongoing support for managers, mental health first aiders, etc. after you go to a training session. Health and wellbeing is a really saturated market, so we wanted a central resource of people that's evidence-based, that's credible, that they know they can trust those resources that are on there. And we wanted to build a community so we can start sharing best practice, share challenges, but also share the positive impact that it has, and then get that message out there to try and influence older generations, the next generation, etc. So the Work Health Hub is an online platform. It's a membership platform dedicated to the mental health and wellbeing of the workforce, and it's underpinned by 6 pillars. So we've got online courses on there, we've got a learning community with loads of resources, tools, signposting, we've got events on there, online and face-to-face. We've got a support directory where we've brought in tons of experts in the field that we've been working with over the last 4 years, who we really trust, who are credible, who know their stuff. They feed into the hub. There's news and research, so that, and with this being a University of Derby initiative, it's that news and research element that's going to act as the conduit between business and academia, and that knowledge exchange mechanism. So researchers from the university can showcase their work, invite participants from organisations to trial things in. And then we've got a solution finder element where people can just ask a direct question and one of us will be able to respond directly to them. So the mission is to empower every single person in an organisation to prioritise mental health and wellbeing.
And when you say in an organisation, how many organisations? How big is this community going to grow to?
It's nationwide. Let's hope we go international. That would be lovely. But even if for a holiday, that would be nice. But with MHPP, the mental health and productivity pilot that we've been working on, we've been restricted to the Midlands because that's what the funding dictated. Whereas the Work Health Hub, there's literally, it can be any organisation, anywhere, any sector. You could be sole traders, you can be SMEs, you can be larger organisations. The hub will have something on there for absolutely everybody.
So you're nurturing nature and those values.
Yeah.
How is the hub, when it's going to be serving, thousands, not hundreds of thousands of people, and helping those people, how does that make you feel?
Really proud, actually. I'm like a proud mom. That's because I think the idea's been in my head for so long that now we've seen it and it's live. I think it's that, we do get the imposter syndrome. Absolutely, I do all the time. And you start questioning things. But it's an amazing thing to see, because people that look at the hub and say, oh, absolutely, we want to sign up for that, can see the value in it. So it's not a hard sell. People that get it will purchase the membership for their organisation and use it to their advantage. And a lot of the organisations we've been working with for a long time, so they trust us, they can see the value in it. They've already had so much positive impact by the stuff that we've already done with them. So their voice speaks volumes. So we've got them to do testimonials and to speak out at events as well, to tell people, you know, how beneficial the support is. So yeah, it's really, really proud for what we've achieved. I know we've got a long, long way to go, but we've got lots of exciting projects in the pipelines.
So how can organisations and people get the most out of these initiatives, not just the hubs as an initiative? How can they get the most out of these? Because sometimes there's a bit of lip service involved.
Yeah, I think, and there are, yes, I absolutely agree with you, because there's lots of initiatives out there and there's loads of people out there that can say, oh, I'll deliver this, this, this and this. And that's another reason why we wanted to keep it affordable as well. You know, this support shouldn't just be available to those big corporates. It needs to be accessible. That was another one of our values, that accessibility. It's important that everybody gets the chance to, obviously, to feed into the hub, etc.
How would you recommend for people to get the most out of these investments when they're invested in mental health?
Yeah.
How does the organisation make it work? How does it become then part of the culture?
I think it's about weaving it into the everyday. So don't see mental health and wellbeing as a tick box exercise. So you can sign up to the mental health at work commitment. You can sign up to Thrive at Work. That's brilliant. As long as you're going to, that's an investment. As long as you don't see it as, oh, that's a really good kite mark to get, or that's good to go on the website. It's not a tick box exercise. If you're going to invest in mental health and wellbeing, it is going to take time. It's going to take patience. But it will, you will reap the rewards if you invest in it. And you haven't got to do it on your own. You've not got to try and navigate the whole mental health and wellbeing arena. That's what we're here for. So we literally guide organisations through every step of the way. They don't ever have to create anything from scratch. We've got loads of resources that we can help them. And it's like a critical friend. So we can go in, make suggestions, recommendations. It really does help having somebody external go in and deliver surveys and staff focus groups as well. And it's sending a really, really positive message to the teams that this is not just something the business has signed up to. They're actually being held accountable by us supporting them every step of the way. So they've not got to do anything on their own.
So what does great look like? Once you've brought all of this together and you've got all of these working, it's all the things that you've talked about, it's normalised, it's simplified. What does great look like? What's it more importantly feel like?
So great would look like a team that works together. And I don't think we've seen that yet, not in a lot of teams. You know, I think it's about seeing the productivity and thinking, how has that been achieved? That's been achieved by people talking to each other, trusting each other, listening. We've all cared about each other, we've invested in each other. And a manager can then stand back and say, do you know what, I know my team really, really well. Great would look like very few people going off sick with mental health issues, because the manager would be so in tune with the team and so aware that they pick it up at the first sort of telltale sign and intervene straight away and put support in place. You can't do that with everybody. I absolutely appreciate that. But I think as a manager, great would look like you sat there thinking, I've done absolutely all I can for my team. So that's what great would look like. Great would also look like every organisation getting membership for every single member of staff for the Work Health Hub, because it's not just about employers, it's about every individual taking responsibility as well for their mental health and wellbeing. And I think then we would start to see a shift and a rise in productivity and in business growth and in sustainability. And it'd be really interesting if I could fast forward like 10 years to see that how that would feel. It wouldn't feel like a job. It would feel like going like home from home. It would feel like you're contributing to something.
I can see it. I can see it, and you're going to make it happen.
Well,
the energy, it's no pressure, but the energy and your commitment to it, I can see that happening, and you're already on track, and it's, kind of for someone looking outside in, you can see that you've got that, and I think it's humbling that you do, kind of show your vulnerabilities, and you do have imposter syndrome that you mentioned a couple of times, because that's what makes you, I just want to support you even more. So
Yeah.
I wish you all the best of luck with it, and I
Thank you
think
very
that you
much.
will do it. And I'm with you. I'm
I know
part
you
of
are.
that journey.
I know.
And we're going to make it happen.
We are going to make it happen.
Well, thank you.
No problem.